get started, my name is Randall Kent. We're going to be talking about getting started with Drupal services. So the overall idea of the talk is exposing data that's within Drupal to other things, or whatever you want to call it, as a web service. And there's a session that's going to be right after this that's sort of the opposite of consuming a web service from Drupal. So if you're interested in web services from both directions, definitely check that out. So like I said, getting started with Drupal services. A little bit about me. I'm an Atlanta native, a rare thing. Anybody else here an Atlanta native? Nice, 3. That's great. Yeah. And I've been a Drupaler since 4 point something. It's hazy. And then when I'm not, working, I'm gardening or doing philanthropic things. Definitely believe in giving back to the community. So that is another big thing, or a big reason rather, why I sort of, find myself gravitating towards Drupal. The company I work for is Savah Group. We're sponsoring the event as well, and we do hosting, development, managed services, and the sales pitch. So our talk today is kind of like an iceberg. When you talk about web services and really what all that they can do, it really is an iceberg. So you've got a whole bunch of stuff that's down there that you may get to at some point, and then you've got the stuff that's kind of obvious up top. And today we're going to be at the top of the top. So we're just going to touch on sort of what REST is, and then we're going to tie that into kind of how we're going to use that to expose data via web service. So you've got Drupal, and you've got all this cool stuff in Drupal. You've got nodes, users, systems, which will make more sense once we get a little bit deeper. But system is a classification of something that you can expose, comments, file, taxonomy, all that goodness. So if one guy, whoops, did he run away? Okay. So you've got a guy, and he says, look at all that cool stuff in the Drupal box. How can you get that cool stuff that's in that Drupal box out of the Drupal box? How can you access it from other places? And the way to do that is really through 3 important letters in API. And there's all different kinds of implementations of an API. You can have like sort of a REST interface, XML, RPC, SOAP, all that good stuff. And today we're all about REST because that's what I like. So I'm sorry. No. But I think after we kind of explain what REST is and kind of the pros and cons, and we're not going to talk about any cons. No, but once we talk about REST, I think you guys will agree. So REST is something that was proposed in a 2000 in a doctoral dissertation in the year 2000 by Roy Fielding, and it is built on top of the HTTP protocol. So this means a lot of different things. Built on HTTP kind of ties into the bottom item there of a uniform interface, where you have a resource such as a URL that you're going to be accessing, and then you have a method of accessing it. So a GET is a simple entering in a website, hitting enter, that's sending a GET request to the server. A POST is commonly thought of with a form, and then put and delete are things that maybe aren't used as often as they could be with regular web forms and whatnot, but with an implementation of a RESTful web service, you're going to see that is very, very kind of important and intuitive. So the idea with REST is you have a client/server type relationship. So within your client, which is whatever you're using to consume this data, you're sending requests to the server's sending it back, and on that client, that's where you're doing some data crunching potentially, and obviously the sort of interface side of things. So how you're going to actually render that information. So this is important because it separates the user interface from data storage. It improves the portability and scalability of whatever you're working with. And one thing that I really like about it is it involves things to grow independently or evolve independently. So if you think about Netflix, for example, opened up a ton of data and they said, you know, have fun with it. And then that ended up sort of biting them because people were able to identify who, you know, whose movie watching habits or whatever were, you know, who they actually were. And that's kind of allowing it to evolve on its own. You sort of release the data and people consume it and chew it up and do whatever they want with it. The next big thing about REST is going to be the fact that it's stateless. What this means is that there's no session state stored on the server. So if any of you are familiar with like .NET development, you've got that view state thing, which is like hideous and comes to the client and then is sent back and forth each time. That's kind of the idea. But with PHP and whatnot, you have, you know, server sessions, and that there can be a lot of information stored within that. So the idea of something that's going to be RESTful, it means that it's going to be stateless. That with every request that's sent, all the information that's necessary to process that request, it's going to be included in it. So if you need to authenticate yourself, or if you need to know whatever the server is going to need to know to return the results that you want, you've got to send it. So this increases or improves a lot of things, but also does have some trade-offs because you've got a little bit of decreased network performance, and it really reduces the control that the server has over what we would call a session, insofar as kind of the way that things happen, you know, as far as ordering. The next big thing is cache making it being cacheable, and that ties right into the layered aspect of things. So the idea here is if the server is going to do all this number crunching and it's going to spit out a result, and if that result's going to be valid for a period of, you know, however many minutes or whatever, you can cache it. You don't have to do that number crunching again, which is kind of important because again, it's going to increase the efficiency and speed that you're able to do this. And then the layered side of things, it sort of ties into caching because, at least in my mind, it does, because you're able to layer web services on top of one another, and by caching, you're really able to speed things up. So, for example, you can have your client send a request to a server, and that server is going to return a response. But in order for that server to return a response, it might need to reach out to other web services. And so that ability to layer, that really abstracts, simplifies the sort of end user's experience. And then, like I said, the uniform interface ties into the fact that it's built on HTTP. So you've got, you know, the resource and the methods and whatnot. Any questions on REST?
If you're doing something like a large media upload, which could take many minutes, and you want it to sort of be restartable and everything like that, is REST the best interface for something like that, or is it really meant for just very small, data?
Yeah, so the question was, I was told to repeat questions so that the microphone can get them, but the question was, is a RESTful API appropriate for large uploads or large sort of transactions, or is it supposed to be more for smaller things? And I would say it's both, because you can definitely have those sort of large uploads, but since everything is stateless, if something breaks, you're going to have to do the entire transaction over again. So depending on how you're looking to implement it, that can say maybe you want to go some other direction. But again, another cool thing is that since it is built on HTTP, that sort of network connectivity that's already built in, where you know, that's built on like the internet protocol, where it's going to try to retry and retry, you get that as a freebie. So it really depends exactly on the implementation that you're looking for. Any other questions? Very cool. All right, so now that we know what REST is, and hopefully we do, a lot of you probably already did, we're just going to dive right into a demo. So I got here this morning, and I sat down at a table to listen to the keynote, and I'm like, all right, let me just open up my laptop and see what's going on, make sure I'm set to go for my presentation. And I realized that I did not bring my external hard drive, which has the virtual instance that I used for my demo. So I spent the keynote recreating what I use, which was thrilling, a lot of fun, a lot of fun. Yeah, I am. But I must say I do love Drush, because Drush definitely speeds things up. Let's see here. Sorry. We're going to just duplicate the screen while we do this so we can both see the same thing. So anyway, this is kind of like my little notes that I have on the steps I take to get something, get a Drupal site set up with services running. And one of the things that we're not going to super address, but we'll touch on briefly, is permissions. So this is what we're going to be doing, is everything's going to be anonymous. So just keep that in mind. It does inherit all of Drupal's sort of permissions, but for the purpose of getting the message across of, kind of what we can do with it, we're just going to ignore that, the whole permissions thing for now. So anyway, like I said, I recreated my environment, so I do have a test environment to fall back on if I do happen to mess something up. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to start from a blank directory, which has nothing in it. We're going to install Drupal. We're going to download the services module. We're going to enable it. We're going to do everything from scratch, just to show you kind of how simple it is to get up and running really quickly. So the first thing is we're going to be, in a directory that ties to a website that's just blank right now. And this sort of text document definitely going to be made available after the fact in case you guys want to try it out on your own. So we'll start copy and paste just for fun, because I will mess it up if I try to type it. We'll download Drupal. Apparently I can't copy and paste. And then once that downloads, it's going to take everything. Yeah, that's what I like. Yeah, right. There we go. Whew. Man, I don't know, but I'm glad it worked. So there we go. We're just going to move everything right into that directory. And so we've got Drupal, bam, there. Next, we're going to install it. This command simply implies that we're going to be setting up an account, username admin, password admin, the database credentials, which I don't know if you guys can see this. Can you? Maybe. Okay, cool. The database has already been created. The user's been created, yada, yada, yada. And so we are going to install, say yes. It's going to do what it does in a few seconds. And then now if we come here, we have a Drupal site ready to go. We can log in, admin, and we're good to go. So the next step in sort of the process here is we're just going to create a content type called contact. So we'll do that really quickly just through the GUI. And then we are going to add a field. There we go. Save it. Looks good. Then we're going to add some content, a contact for myself. And I guess I do want to mention that the reason that I'm using content as contact rather, as the content type that we're doing this is my whole experience with services was based on a need that a client had where they wanted to do some lead generation across multiple different platforms through a lot of different providers, but they wanted to manage all of those leads in a central place. So we created this sort of endpoint so anybody can post contacts to it. And it's really simple to, grasp. All right, so cool, we've got that. We added a content. Now we're going to download services, and then we're going to enable services. Success. I like that green stuff. Warning. All right. Whatever. Let's see. Was not found. Oh, yes. My apologies. Okay. Forgot the Y. And the Y, just if you don't know, Drush just says approve, say yes to everything that it asks you. And now there is a little library that's needed, and it's this is kind of the messy part of the process. And this is oftentimes where people can get kind of lost, is because you figure you can download a module and you should just be able to, go from there. Unfortunately, not entirely the case. So just copy paste, this guy too. Oh boy. Bum, bum, bum. That's my OCD, just cleaning that up. And then what we're going to do is, the structure of the services module is you have the services module, which really kind of exposes the things, and then you have different servers that you can enable. So for example, what we're doing is we're going to be enabling a REST server. So if you're not a fan of REST, if I didn't sell you on REST in the first part of the talk here, and you're a SOAP guy or girl, you can totally use a SOAP server or XML RPC. They offer all of that as kind of separate things that you just kind of plug into place, which is nice, especially if you're dealing with some developers that don't want to change and they want to keep doing things that they've always done. So it can accommodate that. So we'll go ahead and enable the REST server, which now ships with the module. And that's a green success, and then we'll just clear the cache because, oh, no we won't. There we go. Clear the cache because it's just what I do a lot. So now what we can do is configure services. And this is really kind of simple and straightforward. You just go to structure, and now we see that we have services. And we are going to add a service, the machine readable name of the endpoint. I'm just going to use this so that I don't get lost. So we're going to call it test service. The server that we're going to use is going to be REST. Again, if we enabled others, they would appear here in this dropdown. And then the path to the endpoint, we'll just say my API. And then you've got the debug mode, which is awesome if you're getting weird errors and you're like, why? This will dump out tons of stuff that you may or may not need. And then session authentication, again, we're not going to dive into that too much. Everything's just going to be done as an anonymous user. Important point is that services will inherit all of sort of what Drupal says you can access or what you can do. So that's really the big takeaway there. So we'll save that, and then we're going to go edit resources. And if you remember that box of all the things, these correlate directly to that. So we're just going to select node. And what this means is what resources can be accessed through this endpoint that we just set up. And for the example that we're going to be doing, we're just going to be viewing contacts, updating them, doing that sort of thing. And you can see that you can configure even more so the fine grain what people should have access to through that endpoint. So this is important if you maybe want to expose multiple endpoints to different entities. So maybe you want one person just to have access to, in our case, create leads, and maybe you have another that might need access to update them. This is a great way to do that. So we'll just click Save. And then on the Server tab, I am just going to select this application x www form URL encoded just to make the demo a little bit easier. But if you're at all familiar with headers, this is just basically saying this is how I'm going to be sending data and get ready for it. So we'll just save that. And then permissions. Again, you in a production environment, you don't want to do this. So don't look. Okay, so now we've got the API or the web service, the endpoint all set up. So if we did /my API, which is the endpoint that we set up, and just go to it, we get absolutely nothing. Do it was the bypass content access control. Yeah, so it's just kind of like, have fun, you know, enjoy. So.
But if we were going to set up a specific user role to be used in a secure manner,
Yep.
is there a set of permissions for the REST server that you have to enable?
You have to be cognizant of what you're trying to do through REST or through your web service, and so whatever permissions you would need to do it, not through the web service, but actually through Drupal. However, and I apologize, the questions were.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not going to repeat them, but anywho, maybe they can figure it out by how I answered. I don't know. All right, so anywho, if we go to
It's not that big a room, we can hear.
yeah, well, it's for the recording. Yeah. Yeah, so if we go to /my API, which is the endpoint, /node, which is the resource that we exposed, it returns a list of all the nodes that that user has permission to. By default, it's XML. I'm not an XML guy, and in prior versions of services, it was a little bit harder to do this, but now you just do a .json, and there you go. You've got it in JSON, which just makes me smile. And then you're a YAML person. You've got YAML, which you really don't. How about that? Maybe that library didn't fully install. But anywho, you get the point. It's you don't have to, before you had to send headers to say, okay, this is what I want back. Now you just put it right there. It's not technically RESTful, but it makes life a heck of a lot easier. So that's kind of the endpoint being exposed. Now we'll play with it a little bit more. I just use REST console. You can use anything. There's tons and tons of tools, extensions, plugins, whatever, for whatever web browser you're using. I'm sure there's standalone applications as well, just to kind of play with RESTful APIs and whatnot. So for the REST request URI, that is essentially our endpoint. So we'll just take that and paste it in there. And if we do a get on the node, we see we get the same thing coming back that we got going directly to that URL. If we want one particular node, we just pass it the node ID, and we get the full node. We get all the good stuff and the stuff that really you don't need, but you get it anyway. And then we'll go ahead and pull it back again, JSON, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy all of this, go into the payload, paste it in. So again, you're going to be sending everything that you want to be done right back to it. So if, for example, my name changed to Bob, we would send that to the server as a put. So the put's going to say, all right, for this node, for this resource that we're accessing, make stuff happen. And hopefully this works. And we look at the raw body, response header, error 406, not good. So what I'm going to do, instead of troubleshooting that, I am just going to go to the demo, another 406.
URL, do you specify one.json or you take that out?
You're right, one, and then also, thank you, 500. Oh my gosh.
I think without
Go
the
back to
one,
the,
maybe.
take the services out that you corrected the URL.
There we go, 200. Whew. Man, 200 is always good. Whenever you see 200, smile. Unless you sent the wrong payload, and then don't smile. And so now if we pull that node, we'll notice that my name is now Bob Kent. And if we went to the GUI version And again, I'm having to log in again because, well, I don't have to see what I'm seeing, but since you're sending that request, it messes up all your sessions and stuff, so you know, just for like testing purposes. But again, in a production environment, you'll probably have things configured a little bit differently. So we've created, or rather, we've queried for a node. We've updated a node, and then posting a node or we created it manually. We pulled it. We updated it. To create one, you would use the post because you're posting that information. And the really cool thing is that you don't need all of this junk if you're just creating a node. Because if we had to give a vendor a specification of, okay, you need to submit, you know, 100 different things in order just to create a node, they'd probably be like, no. So luckily you can just submit whatever you want, and you'll get a 404 because I'm posting to the wrong place, and I'll get a 401 node. Indeed it is. Thank you. You guys are great. You really are. 406. Oh my God. What do we do now? None. There's probably something not right with. Well, clearly something not right with what I'm trying to do. But the point is that you can submit a payload like that, and it will take it. If we enabled the debug, we'd get more information as exactly kind of why that's happening. But the point is that you're able just to send that payload of the JSON that you want created and have it be done. So this is cool because, you know, we've now exposed all the data within Drupal to the world or whoever you really want to expose it to. But oftentimes there are instances where you might not necessarily. There we go. Where you might want to actually use code to do what you're trying to do, to access a you know, web service that's Drupal services web service. And so I wrote a couple sort of helpers. They're very lightweight, and again, this is primarily for demo purposes and just to kind of show you how it can be done. Ironically enough, I guess somebody saw that I was doing this session and did a couple things, and I had like a pull request on GitHub that I've got to take a look at one of these days. But the big thing that this does is it handles sessions. So you have sort of a login function that's going to log you in, grab that session data, remember it, and then all of your calls from then on, because if you remember we're client server, everything's stateless, it keeps track of that for you. So there's one in PHP and then another one in .NET, which, you know, I'm probably going to get hated on for, but whatever. I already have a PC and I'm running Windows 8, so I'm used to getting harassed. And then obviously, where else do you go? The services project is the place to go for documentation, all kinds of stuff. It's definitely come a very long way from where it was. There's a lot of good documentation, a lot of good tutorials, a lot of good stuff like that. And with that, I just want to open it up for questions. Good.
What about complex things like field collections or entity reference? How does it deal with that?
Okay. The question was, how does it deal with complex things such as references or field collection? It is essentially as if you're coding it, because what you're receiving back is pretty much the node. So if you're used to working with that in PHP in like a custom module or something, you're going to do it the exact same way. And another thing that actually I did not mention that has been a question in the past was, you know, how do you query things? How do you search things? And I've been told, and I've not personally used it, but there is some level of, like, I guess a way to use views to do that sort of thing. So that's just another tidbit of information. Did you have a?
Yeah, I was going to ask about that actually. You made a very quick, publicly accessible server
Yep.
that used views and XML coming out of views, and I was going to ask if that's a good thing to do, or if there's like a limit to what views can do with it.
Gotcha.
When we should sort of start making a transition over to services.
Okay, so the question was, I guess, or it was kind of a statement slash question. Expose some information with views. At what point do we switch over to services? I would say that that's probably going to be driven by whomever's consuming your data, because if the people that are consuming it, they don't need, you know, a RESTful web service or whatever web service, then you're probably good. The OCD in me would say, you know, I would do services just because that's, to me, a cleaner thing, I would think. So it's, again, depends on the implementation. So
So in order to figure out what is required when you're doing a post, like if you're creating something or updating something, how do you go about finding those things out?
what I'll do is, I don't have it in this text document, but I'll add it to it. I'm just not doing something right with the requests that I'm sending, because you should be able to just send that title and then whatever field that you want to update, and that should work. But I'm just missing a minor detail, and rather than, you know, work through it, I can just post the correct
Yeah, and that's
way.
you know, so that maybe somebody else is using your service, and
Sure.
it'd be good to tell them,
Yep.
well, these are required fields and these are not.
Absolutely. And that was actually, I don't think I repeated the question. The question was kind of what structure does the post need to be in to create a node? So, yeah. Any other questions? Shoot.
Yeah, in answer to that, there's actually a good documentation of services API on Drupal, which is to do with mobile, but it's about mobile talking to services. So that's, if you look up Drupanium.org, I think.
Is it Drupania? Drupanium. So there's more guidance on accessing that API through, on Drupanium.
Yeah, it has some good documentation,
Good, clear documentation. Okay, very cool. And I'm not trying to just say it back. I'm just for this guy. I'm not slow, I promise. No. All right. Any other questions? Shoot.
Authentication.
Yep.
You did a good job of bypassing authentication. Can you talk about some of the authentication methods, OAuth versus
Sure.
two-way or, you know, whatever it is?
Yep. No, there are actually, with services 3.x, you've got authentication modules. So one of the things that, I can show you. Duplicate again. If we go into the structure and then the services and then the service that we created, we can see that there are no authentication modules enabled. And so you have sort of options to do it. We've, in the past, we just use sort of the built-in, like seriously, we send a username and a password in the payload, and we get back a session ID, and that's what we're tracking. But I think there is actually an OAuth authentication module that comes with services by default. So there are definitely options there as far as kind of what you can do. Any other questions? No? Very cool. Oh, and then also I wanted to just put this up there. If you guys could please take a minute to go online and give me some feedback. There's a bit.ly URL. It's all lowercase, bit.ly/DCATL-services. I'd really like to get your constructive criticism, hate mail, compliments. I'll take whatever, but it's I definitely want to improve what I'm doing, so I appreciate your feedback. But anyway, thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Take care.